Hello everybody, my name is Happy and I'd like to welcome you all to my History Reaction channel. It's Friday, so we are going to be continuing with our Napoleon series from Epic History TV. As always, I will include a link in the description down below. Please consider heading over to Epic History and showing them some love and support if you like what you see here. Obvious that they put a lot of work into this. I know that a lot of you out there really love this series and pushing me to keep it going. Well, I'm going to keep it going. That's not a problem. But if you haven't already gone over and shown some kind of support for Epic History, please consider doing so. We really want to let them know that we appreciate what they did here. All right, with that out of the way, let's just get into this. I'm going to give my standard disclaimer that I am not a military historian, or do I know a lot about Napoleon or the Napoleonic era, specifically about events surrounding Napoleon. I know the broad strokes, but not much in the terms of detail. So I'll be learning right around with you. I will try to put in context whenever and wherever I can. Just be aware that I'm probably not going to be able to do as much as I normally like to, because I don't like just sitting here and watching this. I like to be able to contribute. That's the whole purpose of the channel. I always feel a little self-conscious. I am aware that that's going to be a problem with this series, and I've made sure you guys are aware that's going to be a problem with this series. You guys have been very supportive, saying, we don't care, just do what you can. So we'll just do that. Here we go.
An Epic History TV PMF Productions collaboration.
Got it.
In 1796, at the height of the French Revolutionary Wars, a young French general took charge of a ragged, demoralized army in northern Italy. It was his first command. Many expected him to fail. Instead, in just 1 month, he won his first brilliant campaign. With astonishing self-confidence, boldness and energy, he led his army to victory after victory, transforming the war in Europe, winning praise from a grateful republic, and forging a legend. This is the story of Napoleon Bonaparte's first campaign, and the dawn of a new age.
All right, Arcole.
October 1796. 6 months have passed since General Napoleon Bonaparte took command of the French army of Italy. In that time, he's led a series of brilliant operations against the Austrians and won a string of battles. Now he appears close to final victory. He's driven Austrian field forces off the plains of northern Italy, back towards the Alps. While his troops have the great fortress city of Mantua, the key to Italy, under close siege.
And 3 episodes so far that they've been sieging Mantua. That's a really tough nut to crack. And it's going to be disease that does it more than anything.
Mantua's oversized Austrian garrison is nearing starvation and riddled with disease. Napoleon appeals to its commander, Field Marshal von Wurmser, to surrender. The brave should be facing danger, not swamp plague, he jibes. But Wurmser is a tough old veteran. He will not yield while any glimmer of hope remains, and he knows that to the north, Austria is gathering fresh troops to march to his aid. True, many are Grentz battalions, a type of Habsburg frontier militia, poorly drilled and short of officers. But they help raise the strength of the Austrian field army to 44,000, and they have a new general to lead them. Feldzeugmeister, or Lieutenant General, Józef Alvinczi.
No. Feldzeugmeister that's actually accurate in some of the states, but specifically in Austria-Hungary, it's more or less a general. A slightly different rank than it is in some of the other countries that use the same. I only know that because one of my fellow students actually did a paper on this. We're all required to read it. So just one bit of trivia I just happen to know about this. I'm not normally into military, but I just remember that he made a big point out of that, is that in Austria-Hungary specifically, this was more a rank of general. than in some of the other countries that use the same name, where it was a little bit lower. Or at least that was my takeaway from it.
The 61-year-old Hungarian was once military tutor to Emperor Francis himself, and is regarded as diligent, sharp, and brave. He and his staff draw up plans for a fresh offensive to rescue Wurmser and Mantua. Alvinczi and Davidovich will lead the main column, 26,000 strong, from Friuli to Bassano. Then onwards to Mantua. Davidovich's corps, reinforced to 18,000, will retake Trento and push south through the Adige Valley. The two forces will link up at the earliest opportunity. Meanwhile, Wurmser, who can muster just 12,000 fit men from the Mantua garrison, will launch powerful sorties to pin down as many French units as possible. Napoleon, by contrast, has received very few reinforcements from France. His weary divisions are suffering from shortages and sickness, and will be outnumbered on every front. Alvinczi begins his advance on the 22nd of October. The following day, the heavens open, drenching troops, swelling rivers, and reducing roads to mud. For the time being, Napoleon is content to observe the enemy struggle forward in such conditions, knowing the effort will exhaust his infantry and disrupt supplies. On the 2nd of November, fighting breaks out north of Trento, where Napoleon has ordered Vaubois to attack. He wants to keep Davidovich bottled up, but Vaubois is heavily outnumbered, and his attack fails. Vaubois begins pulling back to Caliano, while Massena gives up Bassano and withdraws towards Vicenza. But now Alvinci's advance becomes strung out, slowed by the heavy rain and poor fitness of his recruits. And it is against Napoleon's nature to remain passive for so long. As the Austrians cross the Brenta, he orders Massena to attack General Liptay's division at Fontaniva, while Augereau attacks Hohenzollern at Bassano. The French launch dozens of separate assaults. But for all their poor march discipline, the Austrian recruits stand their ground and fight hard. With around 3,000 casualties on each side, the Second Battle of Bassano is the bloodiest day's fighting so far in the Italian campaign.
Okay.
And a failure for Napoleon. Hours later, he receives dire news from Vaubois. During heavy fighting at Caliano, some Croatian troops get behind the French line, triggering panic and a rout. Vaubois loses nearly half his division, killed, wounded, or missing, before he can regroup at Rivoli. The French are falling back on all fronts. And unless Napoleon can conjure something remarkable, he seems destined to suffer a major strategic defeat.
Soldiers, I am not satisfied with you. You abandon yourselves to panic. Were driven from positions where a handful of brave men might have stopped an army. Let it be inscribed on their colors. They are no longer part of the army of Italy. Napoleon's proclamation to the 39th and 85th Demi Brigade, 7th of November, 1796. For 1796, this is the year that Catherine the Great dies. That's going to lead to the ascension of Paul over in Russia, which is going to be a very short-lived reign. He's going to try to undo everything that Catherine the Great did. His successor will be Alexander I, who is going to get tangled up in all of this. And the same year is also, I had to pause for a moment for a sneeze. Same year is also a major rebellion, potential rebellion in Ireland. The French are actually going to send a large fleet of ships, about 12,000 men, to County Cork, Ireland, to support this uprising, to basically give the British other things to worry about than the French. It's a Battle of Bantry Bay. I think it takes place in December. It was a little bit after this, but the Irish are already starting their uprising. This is also at this time, Toussaint Louverture is gathering support for the Haitian Revolution over in Saint-Domingue, Haiti. So France has got a lot of other things going on, and of course they've got other fights up to the north as well, in addition to what's going on here.
Napoleon's position is perilous, but his enemy's cautious pursuit affords him some respite. 4 whole days pass while Alvinczi and Davidovich coordinate their next moves. It's not a delay Napoleon would have tolerated if the shoe had been on the other foot. When the Austrians finally advance, it's bungled. Hohenzollern's vanguard approaches Verona to investigate reports of a French retreat. This isolated division is too tempting for Napoleon to ignore. He orders Augereau and Massena to attack. They inflict 400 casualties, but Hohenzollern escapes to a ridge near Caldiero. The next day, Napoleon orders renewed attacks, but conditions are atrocious. The French struggle uphill into driving rain and hail, their boots slipping in the mud, under fire from Austrians dug in on the ridgetop. Around noon, Colonel Dupuy's 32nd Demi-Brigade finally gets onto the ridge. It looks like the French may be able to lever the Austrians out of their position. But then, the Austrian army begins to arrive in force to support Hohenzollern's hard-pressed division. The French are in danger of being outflanked on both wings. They take up new defensive positions and hold the line until darkness, when Napoleon cuts his losses and orders a retreat to Verona. It has been an unequivocal French defeat, Napoleon's first in battle. The following day, he writes,
"Had to happen sometime. Can't win all of them. Unless you're Alexander the Great."
Furiously to the Directory in Paris. He has no doubt that they are to blame for his defeat, for repeatedly failing to send reinforcements. We may be on the verge of losing Italy. None of the expected help has arrived. The army of Italy, reduced to a handful of men, is worn out. The heroes of Lodi, Millesimo, Castiglione and Bassano have died for their country or are in the hospitals. The men have nothing left but their reputation and their pride. We are abandoned in the depths of Italy. But despite his apparent despair, Napoleon has already devised a plan to strike back. A breathtakingly bold move that will spawn one of the greatest of Napoleonic legends.
Right, one last effort.
With the Austrians
One moment, go back to that. In a few days, we will try one last effort. If fortune smiles upon us, Mantua will be taken, and with it, Italy. Napoleon to the Directory, 13th of November, 1796.
With the Austrians converging on Verona, Napoleon decides to risk everything on a daring surprise attack. Leaving Macquart to cover Verona, he will circle south with the rest of the army, cross the Adige River, and swing north, threatening to cut Alvinci's lines of communication and capture his artillery, baggage, and supplies. Such losses will force Alvinczi to abandon his advance.
That is a pretty daring move.
Marching overnight, Augereau and Massena arrive undetected at Ronco. Augereau's men cross the Adige on a pontoon bridge and begin moving north. But with marshland on all sides, they have to stick to the narrow, raised causeway, just 20 yards wide. And when they reach Arcole, where they must cross the bridge to continue north, they find it held by 2 Croatian battalions, horribly exposed on the causeway, and under heavy fire. The French troops take cover behind its reverse slope. Reinforcements are sent up, but they too are pinned down by the weight of fire from the far bank. Colonel Lannes had discharged himself from hospital that morning in order not to miss the battle. He now attempts to lead a charge, but is hit in the leg. The fiery Augereau refuses to accept defeat and orders another attack. But his men are exhausted and demoralized, with 3 generals wounded. The attack at Arcole has stalled. When
Really
Alvinczi
can't
hears
afford that.
gunfire from the south, he assumes the French are making a feint to divert him from his own planned attack on Verona. But then comes alarming news that the French have crossed the Adige in force and are behind his left flank. He sends 2 brigades to attack the French bridgehead and diverts Mitrovsky to reinforce Arcole. Massena's division, moving northwest to protect the flank of the advance, runs straight into the Austrians at Bionde. At first, the Austrians have the better of it, but a disastrous friendly fire incident triggers panic, and Massena drives the Austrians back up the causeway.
Never underestimate the effect of friendly fire in war. It's way more common than people tend to realize. Way more common.
Napoleon is increasingly concerned by the hold-up at Arcole. If they cannot break through, Alvinczi will have ample time to redeploy and prevent any advance. He now orders General Gueux to take 2 regiments, cross the Adige at Albaredo, and lead them up the eastern bank of the Alpone River to hit Arcole from the south. He himself rides to the bridge to try to get the attack moving. He finds hundreds of French troops sheltering behind the causeway, unwilling to face the Austrian fire. General Augereau grabs a standard and begins to advance. This highly romanticized depiction was painted 2 years later.
Yeah. Something we gotta remember about Napoleon is that he is very much a political creature as well as a general. And especially when he gets, after he's got a few successes under his belt, which he does by this time, he really starts his own propaganda machine, where he releases pamphlets, flyers, missions, artwork, all glorifying and to some extent exaggerating the stuff that he's doing. So he has a PR division, so to speak, in his military. So we kind of have to keep that in mind when we're talking about Napoleon. He starts that fairly early on. And a lot of the stories you're going to hear, there's what happened, and then there's the romanticized version of what happened. And Napoleon himself had a lot to do with the romanticized version.
"Dears," he cries, "come and seek your color." In reality, none had the courage to follow him. Then, the commander of the army of Italy himself draws his saber, picks up a standard, and runs forward. There is withering fire all around. Several men fall wounded. His aide-de-camp, Colonel Murat, is killed. Another aide-de-camp, a Polish officer named Sulkowski, recalls, "The soldiers saw him, and none of them imitated him." I was witness to this extraordinary cowardice, and I cannot conceive it. With the French infantry refusing to follow their officers, the assault on the bridge ends in abject failure. A well-timed Austrian counterattack drives them back down the causeway. In the rout, Napoleon's horse loses its footing. He tumbles into the swamp and has to be hauled out by his aides. That evening, General Gueux launches his attack on Arcole from the south. The defenses are less formidable on this side, and his men fight their way into the village. Arcole, at last, has fallen.
All right.
But that night, Gueux's men are ordered to pull back. Napoleon is preparing to retreat. If, as he expects, Davidovich has continued his advance down the Adige Valley, Napoleon must withdraw now or face encirclement. His bold maneuver appears to have failed. Then, at 4 a.m., Napoleon receives a report from Rivoli that changes everything. Not only does Vaubois still hold the town, he hasn't even been attacked yet. Napoleon's line of retreat remains secure for at least a few days more. It's all the reassurance he needs. He immediately cancels his retreat and issues orders to attack.
Day 2.
Napoleon has lost the element of surprise. and Alvinczi is now planning his own counterattack. Overnight, his troops edge forward. Provera to Belfiore di Porcile, Mitrovsky back into Arcole. Both armies are on the move before dawn. Massena sends skirmishers into the marshland. When the Austrians arrive, bunched up on the causeway, they make easy targets after a sharp fight in which an Austrian general is killed. Massena's men are driving the enemy before them.
That's a pretty good use of skirmishers. Get them out there where they can stay more or less hidden, get a good shot at the flank. That's not a bad move. A little risky if things go wrong, but in case they didn't.
Augereau, however, cannot get close to Arcole. The causeway is still swept by Austrian musket fire and canister from across the Alpone. Napoleon orders troops to cross downstream at Albaredo. But the Austrians now have 2 battalions guarding the crossing point. French attempts to float or swim across the river come to naught. Day 2 of the battle ends in stalemate. Many soldiers have to camp amid the marshes and get what food and rest they can. Napoleon will try once more to break through. But he is running out of time. Davidovich, who by now has received several urgent requests from Alvinczi to advance, finally attacks on the 17th of November. Vaubois' outgunned division breaks. The Austrians take Rivoli and 1,000 prisoners, and nearly capture Vaubois himself. With Davidovich on the move at last, Napoleon must force a decision at Arcole or retreat. The bridge at Arcole has proved too tough to crack. So Napoleon switches tactics. Augereau's division will cross the Alpone and attack Arcole from the south in force. A column is sent 10 miles south to cross at Legnago and then race back up the eastern bank to support him. Massena will advance up the causeway in support, while also protecting the left flank. That night, the French assemble a pontoon bridge over the Alpone.
Yeah, they've been doing a lot of pontoon bridges in this video. So shout out to the engineers and the sappers. They're often underappreciated parts of the army, but they're essential, especially in situations like this where you're dealing with a lot of difficult terrain, bogs, and rivers.
Augereau's division begins crossing before dawn. But at sunrise, Austrian gunners in Albaredo spot the bridge and score a hit, knocking it out of action.
That's
Only the
not good.
51st Demi Brigade is across, though it gamely begins to advance on Arcole. Massena's advance is also hamstrung by a broken pontoon bridge. To add to the crisis, the Austrians launch an attack on the fragile French bridgehead. Napoleon gathers every available gun to blast the Austrians, who fall back under a withering barrage. The bridges are quickly repaired, but as the French advance, they encounter stubborn opposition on both sides of the Alpone. A bloody seesaw battle surges back and forth along the causeways. Neither side can deploy its troops nor gain an advantage. Around 3 p.m, the French column from Legnago arrives, threatening to turn the Austrian flank. Just as Arcole seems about to fall, the Austrians launch a ferocious counterattack across the bridge. Brigadier General Robert is killed. His troops fall back in disarray. The panic is contagious. Augereau's men lose their nerve and fall back to the bridge. The moment of crisis has arrived. But while the enemy has just used his last reserves, Napoleon can call on Massena's unengaged troops, including the elite 32nd Demi Brigade. Their sudden counterattack turns the tide. Massena's men sweep up the causeway, taking scores of prisoners, as Augereau's division resumes its advance. As they approach Arcole, Napoleon arranges a small ruse de guerre. 25 of his elite escort sweep in from the east, blowing bugles to feign a mass cavalry charge.
We talked about this before. This is fairly common in war. It's the idea of misdirection, of convincing the enemy that you have a large force where you don't, convincing them you don't have a large force where you do. It would be a classic example.
In the evening light, it's enough to scare the remaining garrison into abandoning the village. As the French continue their advance, Alvinczi orders his exhausted, demoralized army to retreat east, to Montebello, to protect its lines of communication. The 3-day Battle of Arcole has been a messy, bloody affair, with no great tactical flourishes. Napoleon's margin of victory is narrow, and a third of his army are casualties, but
I don't think it's quite that high. The third, I think that's probably a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's still significant. Hold on, I'm going to check. I'm just curious. All right, without diving way too deep, looking at a couple of different sources, it's looking more like Napoleon probably had about 25% casualty, about a quarter of his total force. Not quite a third, but still. Some of the estimates vary, so it might be a little above or below that. So, but I checked a couple of different sources, and all of them put it closer to a quarter or even a little less than to the 1/3.
he has done enough for now.
It took good luck to defeat Alvinczi, Napoleon Bonaparte.
Alvinczi may be withdrawing, but Davidovich remains a threat. The next day, Napoleon sets off at his customary pace, with Massena's division to reinforce Vaubois. Augereau takes a different route, to threaten the Austrians' line of retreat. The confusion that follows between Alvinczi and Davidovich verges on farce. Alvinczi writes to his corps commander, informing him that he will support him by resuming his advance. But Davidovich, having heard of the defeat at Arcole and now directly menaced by Napoleon, is already retreating. On receiving Alvinci's letter, however, he tries to turn his army around, leading to such chaos that he has to immediately countermand that order and resume his retreat. The end result is that both Austrian armies are soon withdrawing. And with exquisitely poor timing, gallant old Wurmser chooses this moment to launch his supporting attack from Mantua. He does at least.
That is pretty bad timing, doing it when they're retreating. Yeah, not good.
Secure some much-needed supplies, at a cost of 800 casualties.
Yep.
It has been a bruising campaign for Napoleon. By some estimates, he has lost more men than the Austrians. He has suffered his first defeat in battle, and won a costly, messy victory at Arcole. But he has beaten the odds and thrown back the enemy. What's more, his heroic conduct at the bridge at Arcole will soon take on a life of its own. Artists and pamphleteers turn a slightly embellished version of events into a sensational piece of personal PR.
Yeah, and it's absolutely very much encouraging.
That captivates France. With Napoleon's active encouragement, the world is witnessing the birth of the Napoleonic legend, a powerful force.
Ah, yes, that's a famous painting, Bonaparte at the Bridge of Arcole.
That will inspire loyalty and devotion for many years to come. For now, both armies settle into winter quarters, as December brings bitter cold and heavy snow to northern Italy.
Yeah, and at this time that French support is sent to Ireland, unfortunately, bad weather prevents the French from landing, which leaves the Irish stranded on their own in the middle of their revolt, so it ended up failing. Bad weather really does screw up a lot of good battles.
In Mantua, the Austrian garrison is near its limit. Starvation beckons, though Wurmser is determined to hold out to the last. The Austrians will have one last chance to save the city. A final offensive to decide the outcome of the war in Italy.
All right.
A big thank you to
All right, so I guess we're done. That one went by quick because it was interesting. I didn't add as much as I'd like. Sorry about that. I try what I can. It was interesting. I actually found that one interesting. That was kind of a tough nut to crack. Getting up and around Arcole with that exposed positions, all those water crossings, that's not an easy thing to deal with. Not really surprising that he struggled to do it. Anyway, thank you for joining me. We will be continuing with Napoleon for probably another good 4 weeks or so. So, you guys next Friday for the next in this series. And because of popular demand, we'll definitely be taking on the marshals as well once we finish the main battles. So, glad everybody's interested in this. If there's anything else outside of Napoleon people would like to see, I highly encourage you to drop comments saying videos you'd like me to look at or specific topics. I try to put as much variety as I can. I'm not specifically focusing on something like this that's a viewer request. One of my personal interests is focusing on lesser known things. So if you've got any that you'd like to hear about on any topic, any point in time, any part of the world, on any scale, whether it's a specific battle or if we're talking about something like the history of Timbuktu, I'm game. So get some suggestions out there. I would appreciate it. Anyway, until next time, I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.